Hello, I'm Maggy Whitehouse, and this is a trailer for my online webinar series Paths of Peace, which starts on the 17th of February 2020. It starts when Mercury goes retrograde, and that's actually appropriate because it's about reweaving, remembering, reprofiling, resetting, getting all the old paths of our lives straight and heading in the directions we want. We're going to be using the Kabbalistic tree of life, and I often teach about the Sephirot, but I've never taught about the paths before. They all have a Hebrew letter assigned to them, and they're well known in the tarot, but if you interpret them in the modern way, they tell you how to get from the different aspects of your psyche to the others so that you're going to live a happy and prosperous life. If you take the wrong path, it's like snakes and ladders. So let me give you a quick story as an idea of how these paths can and can't work. This is 30 years ago now. My first husband died, and my first boyfriend after him was about a year later. His name was Terry. And I fell in love because I was vulnerable and I really wanted to be loved again, and it was marvellous. But really, Terry wasn't the kind of guy that was going to suit me at all. Foolishly, we went on holiday to Tobago together, and he dumped me on the second day. I could have seen that coming if I'd known about path working, but I didn't. Anyway, the point of the story is that the day he dumped me, we'd been scuba diving in the Caribbean. Now, Terry was supposed to be an expert scuba diver, and I was a complete amateur. But it turned out that I took to it like a duck takes to water, or more likely as a fish takes to water, and Terry really couldn't hack it any longer. He was quite a lot older than me, and there was a certain amount of ego involved in why he dumped me later for being very good at scuba diving when he wasn't. But that's another story. Anyway, the following morning we got a phone call from the dive centre saying, "We didn't give you a proper experience yesterday, so we'd like to offer you a free day's diving today. Can you come?" Well, I said yes because I was distraught, upset, had nothing else to do, and this was an opportunity to get me out of myself. Terry said no, which was a relief, and I went off to the dive school again. Now, what I didn't know was the reason why they'd asked me to come again, to ask both of us, was because they didn't realise we were a couple. They didn't think we were a couple. We obviously weren't presenting as a couple. And one of the men who ran the dive school, a lovely guy called Ned, really fancied me. And I hadn't spotted that. Anyway, I went diving again the next day, and we were supposed to be doing two good dives. One dive, lunch, then another dive. And it was totally free, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous, and I started to relax. And then, while I was under the water with Ned, I suddenly had a revelation, an absolute revelation, Hochma. It was okay. This was fine. Terry wasn't right for me. I could have a wonderful 5 more days in Tobago. It could be utterly wonderful. I didn't have to grieve. It was time to move on. This was my bridging relationship, and there would be a better relationship to come. I felt amazing. And instead of going, excuse me, I'm doing this in the mirror. I was looking at the computer, so I'm going in the wrong direction. Instead of going from Hochma to Bina, understanding, thinking it through, taking it time about it, I went down this path to Hesed, which is loving kindness. Now, if you go to Binah, you're going to consider whether through your free will you want to go to Hesed for loving kindness, and to whom you want to offer that loving kindness, to yourself, to the other, or to both. I didn't do that. I went straight down the path, down the snake, to Hesed, and thought, I have to get back now and tell Terry it's all right and I've forgiven him. So I said to Ned under the water that I needed to go up. And when I went up with him, he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, but I need to get back." So I dumped the rest of that morning, a lunch, an afternoon, a time with a man who thought I was really attractive and lovely, in order to race back to the resort to tell a man who didn't love me that it was okay. And of course he didn't care. So I ended up that afternoon thinking, oh, I don't think I did quite the right thing there. Now, I'm not saying I would have had a relationship with Ned. I don't think I would. I was too bruised. However, certainly the path of peace for me was to go from Hokmah to Binah, to consider and to be kind to myself. But my pattern was to be kind to the other. So that's just a little kind of story to tell you that there are all sorts of paths on this magical tree of life that we need to learn how to take in order to live our lives easily. And that's what I'm going to be showing you in the webinar, with discussion and with meditations and with exercises. And we'll work on the paths of inspiration from the top down and the paths of when you're faced with something in reality and how you react to it from the bottom up. So please join me. You can find out more on my website, treeofsapphires.com/workshops. Thank you. Thanks for joining me.